Let's jump to this next story. What I have before you, my friends, is YouTube's COVID misinformation policy. The funny thing about this is I'm like, the most of the COVID stuff's over, like the mandates are mostly over. The US still require vaccines for entry, but they don't actually check. So it's actually the airlines who are requiring it. And then some people, here's a funny thing. Tons of people, everybody who travels knows this. They were like, you don't fly to the United States anymore. You fly to Tijuana and then walk in. You just walk in. They don't check. They don't care. It's the weirdest gap in security and policy or whatever. But anyway, here's the point. YouTube's medical misinformation policy, when you scroll down to prevention misinformation, doesn't mention anything about masks. In fact, I will do this in real time. Control F, and we'll type in M-A-S-K, nothing. The word mask does not appear in YouTube's misinformation policy anymore. So I tweeted this. YouTube updated its policies to no longer ban claims that masks do not play a role in preventing the spread of COVID. Essentially, you are now allowed to claim masks don't work. So we can see, initially, it used to say this. Claims that masks do not play a role in preventing the contraction or transmission of COVID-19. You were not allowed to say that. YouTube removed that, and I'm assuming you can now say it. Here's what they say.
I'll let you say it first because I got all kinds of censorship.
Oh, no, but look.
Period of time in my life, I'm good.
It says that the Google misinformation policy. YouTube's policies on COVID-19 are subject to change in response to changes to global or local health authorities' guidance on the virus. There may be a delay between new LHA and WHO guidance and policy updates given the frequency with which his guidance changes, and our policies may not cover all LHA and WHO guidance related to COVID. This is a serious problem that scientists have been saying this very thing, and YouTube was banning them. Rand Paul came out. Dude's a doctor. They gave him a strike on YouTube for bringing this up. If a doctor can't even talk about it, which doctor can? YouTube has arbitrarily chosen the World Health Organization as their end-all be-all for what is true and correct. Mm-hmm. This is extremely dangerous because the World Health Organization is a political entity, not a medical one. It is a political international entity, not a medical body. It is not like an academic group of doctors at a university doing clinical trials. It is a political institution. And YouTube's like, they'll be the experts.
Do you think that's because they feel like they are obligated to listen to a global authority because they view themselves as a global platform, even though it's based in the U.S.?
I think for YouTube, it's the easy way out. The World Health Organization, they have their pinkies in all these countries.
Good enough.
No. They actually work with a bunch of countries. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it's easier to use them as a standard so that we don't get in trouble with these other countries.
Well, how did we pick our arbitrators for other fact checking? You had the Washington Post, or not Washington Post, New York Times, and other periodicals that were being sent articles to see if it was political misinformation, if it was scientific misinformation. It didn't have to just be about masks, but either you're going to have complete censorship or you have no censorship. And the complete censorship needs a lot of oversight, and we're not there. And that's the idea, that you're not going to have a platform that's perfect. There's things that we can all agree on, that exploitation of children, violence, extremism in some sort of way of like
calls for violence, basically.
Basically calls for violence. Those are generally accepted no-nos. It's when we get into these gray areas that you take a hard line stance and you ruin businesses, you ruin people's lives.
The problem is some people argue for free speech absolutism, meaning they argue you could call for violence because you didn't actually do anything. And I get it. If the idea is, we don't allow speech that calls for violence because that's a crime, well, that's not an argument, because then all that has to happen is they decide another kind of speech is a crime. Okay, well, now, insulting someone or not using their pronouns is assault or violence, and thus now they can say, well, that's not free speech, you're committing a crime, right? So there is an issue in at what point does speech become illegal, and can it? And a question of, shouldn't it just be on you to defend yourself?
I would think so, but we have seen that it becomes a safe haven, a place where people can congregate and start creating organizations and a movement of violence and extremism. And I think it's very similar and has some connotations to Afghanistan. And people had an argument of, we don't need to be there. There's no objective for us, but it allowed for a safe haven of horrible individuals to congregate, plan, and execute atrocious acts. In my opinion, you need to have some oversight, but it's not living there 24/7. It's pinpoint action taken towards those individuals.
I don't think there's a solution at all. So they want to censor people because, people are offensive or whatever. We all agree, like, hey, don't incite violence. Don't tell people to commit violence. Don't tell them how to commit violence. We all agree that's a bad thing. The issue, though, is now from that point, they've moved on to the next point, stochastic terrorism. Well, now you're saying things that will infer the idea or convince someone to go do something. Well, that's calling for violence. That's where they're at now. And they will eventually ban that. I'm not entirely sure they can. I'm saying their goal is to get that kind of speech banned, where if you said something like, we should shut that school down because of the horrible things they do, they say, hey, we know what you're getting at. It's won't someone rid me of this meddlesome priest thing? And that's what they're trying to argue now, because people like James Lindsay and Libs of TikTok have been criticizing these hospitals that have been doing surgery on these kids. They're saying, oh, that's stochastic terrorism, and their goal is to rally people to eventually go and do something. It's like, there's no line. You can keep ramping it up until eventually you've banned all speech.
Just because you're afraid doesn't mean that I made you afraid. Like, just because someone's in terror doesn't mean that someone else committed a terroristic act. Terror is a very, I don't know. I think it's very hardcore. I mean, if you're making people fear for their life without other than words, and in the United States, it's an imminent threat of violence, not just threats of violence. Not like, hey, go something. It's when you give a date and a time and a place, that creates an imminent threat, and that is illegal in the United States. You're allowed to say, like, hey, go fill in the blank. I'm not talking about YouTube terms, I'm talking about American civil liberties. But you cannot call for imminent threats of violence. I think that social networks that are based in the United States and run in the United States should follow American law. Personally, that's what Minds does.
Well, they follow the World Health Organization instead.
Then I think we should take the keys away and maybe free up the space a little bit, because private companies should not be getting in the way of the country that helped them create themselves.
And individuals who find themselves wronged in every way, shape, or form. And there's settings out there. You can make yourself private. You can ban everyone from being on your page. You can just get off of social. That's one of those things where I'd like to tell people, if it's really causing you this much anxiety and this much heartache, one, it might be you. Two, you have options to just turn it off. It's not that big of a deal. But when we start infringing upon everyone else's rights just to make you happy, that's where I draw a line. Just get off of social if it's the fact that people aren't addressing you by the right pronouns, if people aren't addressing you by the right fill in the blank, and now you're on a rampage, and now it's your social justice warrior, and I have to placate to that, and I don't want to. And that's really what it boils down to, is you just do you, let me do me. And I think if we could ever get back to that point, we would be a much happier society. But right now, we just hone in on the negatives, and we try to impose our opinions on other people, as opposed to saying, hey, we have a difference of opinion. That's fine. That's why I like to fight overseas against terrorists who don't allow you to have a different opinion. You talk about all the bad things here, go to those other countries where you get stoned to death if you have intercourse with someone else.
What about the terrorists that are here trying to stop you from being able to say what you want and have an opinion, and the ones who are running big companies and defending those people?
Those are domestic terrorists, in my humble opinion. Hopefully that doesn't get me kicked off.
Who are you talking about?
Like when BLM or Antifa will show up and throw a brick through your window because you said naughty words.
Yeah, I think they are domestic terrorists. People that will destroy property and threaten life for a social movement, I think I would consider them terrorists. I consider George Washington a terrorist. King George did at the time.
Yeah, there was a meme going around where these people are posting like, Trump should remember, this is what they do to traitors, and it was a guy being hanged. The funny thing though is, I was like, it was redcoats hanging a Minuteman. Not a Minuteman, but a Continental Army, blue coat. And then I was just like, the treason you're showing was against the crown. Like, it was the Americans being like, yo, we don't believe in monarchy. And so they said that's treason. And these people are sharing that as if, like, it's a good thing to uphold.
Because it shows that fighting oppression is no longer the mainstream. It's now, everyone wants to be subjugated. They want to be told what to do. They want to be told, that everything that's not good with you, everything that's gone wrong in your life, it's not you. It's not your lack of effort. It's not your work effort. It's everyone else's. And that we need to take things and give to this group. I think that's a slippery slope that we're headed.
Just out of curiosity, were you ever on any alternative platforms like Minds or Gab or...
I don't even know what those are.
They're just alternatives to, I don't know, any social media platform or Twitter.
No, I'm probably the world's worst on getting on social and trying to stay engaged. I do try to connect with my kids, try to connect with my fan base. But this is one of those things it's kind of foreign to me. I'm a guy who'd rather be out in the woods and be completely disconnected from the world.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.